Moshe Taragin from Acțion for the OU All Parsha video series, Parshas Tavo. Parshas Tavo is part of a tandem, B'chokosai and Tavo, two different tochachas, big, huge machlokas between the Ramban and the Abarbanel, how to parse those two tochachos. Classically, the Ramban quotes about 10 rayos, 10 proofs, that they each correspond to a different galus. B'chokosai corresponds to the first galus, Tavo corresponds to the second galus, and of course, the hidden message is, if there are two tochachos, there are only two exiles, which means that we're here to stay, that we're not going to be exiled from our homeland again. Famous consolation of the Ramban from Parshas Tavo. Barbanel differs, but in the Ramban's scheme, there's an important difference that seems to be adopted implicitly by some of our Tanaim in the Gemara. The Tochacha in Parshas B'chokosai, which according to the Ramban corresponds to the first galus, ends in an absolute unilateral fashion. We're in galus, and we're suffering, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers the bris. V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov, v'af es brisi Yitzchak, v'af es brisi Avraham ezkar, v'haaretz ezkar. Remembers the bris of the Avos, and of course, since this is after we've already lived in Eretz Yisrael, we now have another bris, a fourth bris, or a second bris, depending on how you count, then the bris of the brisos of the Avos, and Haaretz Eskar, bris Eretz Yisrael. We lived in Eretz Yisrael, even for people who don't always perpetuate the lifestyle of the Avos, and may not have bris Avos available to them, they're still part of Israel, and still part of Jewish destiny. Really important point to keep in mind. HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeems us, because he remembers the bris of Yitzchak and Yaakov, and he remembers the bris Haaretz. And of course, this is the historical account. There was no mass teshuva after the first galus. You could say that maybe Shushan, Kimu, V'kiblu, Hayudim, Alem, V'al-Zaram, there was some spiritual religious renaissance. There was some, according to Chazal, Kimu, V'kiblu, Kimu, Lamata, Masha Kiblu, Lamala, Kimu, Lamal, Masha Kiblu, Lamata. There was some, but it doesn't sound like it was a teshuva. The closest we have to teshuva is when they come back and there's a confessional, although the confessional isn't that heartfelt, and it's Ezra, and they still have foreign wives. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeems us. There's no cause and effect. There's no teshuva that leads to redemption. Gedol teshuva, shem mekareves es hagula. Now, what about the second tochacha, which, according to the Ramban, refers to the second galus? So the second tochacha actually ends on a pretty bad note, that we're sent as slaves back to Mitzrayim, where we were once supposed to return. Whether Mitzrayim is literal, Mitzrayim is metaphoric. Remember, we were taken as captives and slaves after the Churban Beis HaMikdash Sheni, for Galus Sheni, to Rome, not to Mitzrayim. It may be metaphoric. But Hashem doesn't step in and redeems us. That's how Parshas Tavo concludes. Take a look. It's pretty frightening. And the only resolution happens in Parshas Nitzavim. Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kolchem. Moshe is restating the fact that he created the bris of Tavo, and Nitzavim looks back to Tavo, Vashechem Shiftechem. And then Moshe says, by the way, when all these things happen, you'll perform teshuva, and then Hashem will take you back. So the literal reading of the second tochacha, which historically is the second galus, is that we will only be redeemed as a consequence of teshuva. This, of course, is a well-known machlokas between Rabbi Hoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, two of Rabbi Kiva's Rebbeim, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadik Tes. And Rabbi Yeshua holds, Bein osim teshuva, bein ein osim teshuva nigalim, despite the fact that the Psukim suggests that we only are redeemed if we perform teshuva. And Rabbi Eliezer takes a much more stark, literal opinion. Osim teshuva nigalim. Ein osim teshuva, ein nigalim. That's pretty scary. According to Rabbi Eliezer, we will only be redeemed, le'asid levo, if we perform teshuva. If not, we'll be stuck in a perpetual state of galus. And as I said before, the simple reading, at least according to the Ramban, if you believe that the second tochacha relates to the second galus and therefore is contrasted with the first tochacha, which relates to the first galus, and the first tochacha historically we were redeemed without teshuva, but the second tahucha, second galus, according to the Ramban, so that's why I believe that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua were more or less adopting the Ramban's shita. They were just arguing about the details. Rabbi Yeshua didn't read the psukim as literally as Rabbi Eliezer read them, but they both felt this was a statement or a documentation about the final galus. So the question is how we paskin. It's hard to say how we paskin because Hilchas Mashicha, it doesn't have any practical nafkaminos. We still have to put on tefillin tomorrow, whether we hold like Rabbi Yeshua. We still should try our best. There's no, because you hold that it's inevitable and independent of teshuva, that shouldn't change your behavior. But yet the Rambam in Hilchas Teshuva, get ready, paskin is like a Eliezer. You thought I'd say paskin of Yeshua because we have that strain in our Masorah of Hashem Kil Racham B'chanun Erech Hapayim. We expect the Yeshua's position to be correct, and also we have this inevitability of Gula in our minds. It's going to happen. Mashiach's going to come, and like, how could you deny it? Whereas Eliezer holds up the possibility that we'll be stuck in a dead end for eternity. So the Rambam in Hilchas Teshuva paskins like Rabbi Eliezer. But, and this is a really important but, and it's this but that I want to elaborate on in this year. The Rambam indeed paskins like Rabbi Eliezer, and our final geula is contingent upon teshuva. However, this pasuk in Nitzavim that I just read that describes teshuva as the release of geula, the release of galus and paving the enabler of geula, the Rambam doesn't read it as a mitzvah. Remember, there's a famous debate whether the Rambam even believes that there is a mitzvah to perform teshuva. At the beginning of Hilchas Teshuva, his language is very, very elusive. He writes, Kish yasa teshuva, when a person performs teshuva, chayiv lisvados lefnei Hashem. Normally the Rambam would write, chayiv lasos teshuva, famous Minchas Chinuch in Parshas Naso. Long debate, does the Rambam hold there is a teshuva? Remember, casting teshuva as a non-mitzvah doesn't diminish its value. It may in some ways amplify its value, because in theory, there could be experiences and values that are so foundational and so seminal that they are pre-mitzvahs and that they defy simple categorization as a mitzvah. So saying that teshuva isn't the mitzvah doesn't in any way empty it of value. It may center it. But in the purely legal sense, this pasuk, V'shavtat Hashem Elokecha in Parshas Nitzavim, definitely doesn't mean for the Rambam there's a mitzvah to perform teshuva, presumably because the Rambam doesn't believe there's a mitzvah at all. It's free will. How could there be a mitzvah? What it does mean, according to the Rambam, is a haftacha. Hashem already promises us. This is a nevuah, or haftacha. V'shavtat Hashem Elokecha. Am Yisrael will perform teshuva. V'shemata b'kolo. And then, because geula and exiting galus is contingent upon teshuva, but that teshuva is inevitable. So, of course, by extension, geula and Mashiach is inevitable, not because it's independent of teshuva, because teshuva is just as inevitable as geula. So the first galus doesn't require teshuva. The second galus does, but teshuva is assured. Now that's a very provocative statement. That's a provocative statement on its own. How could human decisions be assured? But it's more provocative when you look around you and you don't always see the Jewish community trending towards teshuva. Now that is itself a loaded statement, because we all know that teshuva isn't all or nothing, and teshuva isn't binary, and there is a resurgence both in Jewish belief and Jewish practice, and in other sectors in Jewish identity. And I've written a lot about that the last couple of weeks, as we're all recognizing that teshuva is always imperfect. So there are many levels of imperfect teshuva. But if we are striving for the highest tones of teshuva, a return to full halachic compliance and a return to Torah mitzvos, it doesn't seem like there are millions of Jews who are headed in that vector. So how do you, as we would say in Yeshiva, how do you shtim the Rambam with reality? And the answer, of course, is Am Yisrael, which is foundational to Ahavat Yisrael. There are all these phrases circling around, and I'm trying to grab them and define them, because if they remain cliches and platitudes, then we'll fall into platitudinous behavior, and it's not going to get anyone anywhere. We'll just say fancy, highfalutin ideas. We've got real work to do. Real work to do. Think about all the work you have to do. This Elul, and I don't mean your own midas, but the Ahavat Yisrael and Jews who aren't living up to expectation, Jews who are disappointing you, Jews who are saying things that are in some ways really unfortunate, but So to me, I'd spend the next month just working on Ahavat Yisrael, but if it becomes a platitude, what do you do? Just say it, and then you watch the news and you're angry and your platitude's out the window. So how do you love other Jews? I've thought a lot about that. One of the ideas I think about is what I call Emunat Yisrael, trusting Klal Yisrael, trusting the Jewish people. There's a rhythm and an impact that the Jewish people have. Let me take it to a different place. Who decided the Yosef Cairo would be the authoritative sefer? No one. There was no plenary. There was no quorum of people that descended. It was just after a couple generations, Am Yisrael felt that this sefer was so lucid and clear and organized, and he was such a surpassing Talmud Chacham that this is going to be the halacha. So if you live in the 16th century and you disagree with the Shulchan Aruch, it isn't walking away from halachic authority, because it has yet to become the authority. 19th century, it already is. 17th century, obviously earlier. So who gave Am Yisrael that power? The answer is Am Yisrael is a life force of its own. And the Rav writes about this famously. The Beis Din sometimes operates not as an autonomous judiciary body, but as a Am Yisrael, as a representative who's really Mekadesh L'Chodesh, who's really Mekadesh Chodeshim, Am Yisrael. So there's something called Am Yisrael and belief in Am Yisrael as this metaphysical form. Not you, not me, not this community, not that shul, but the Jewish people writ large. And you have to have trust that they'll do the right thing. And when you trust that they'll make the right decisions and reach the finish line, because we're Baramatem Hashem Elokechem, you're able to defy the world as you see it, and you're able to offer a different narrative, which is behind all prophecy. Forget Ahavat Yisrael for a second. I'm living here in Gush Etzion. The world hates us. We're obstacles to peace, anti-Semitism, ring of fire, people are aligned, and so we're not escapists. We don't flee from reality, but there's another narrative, and it's the narrative of Zechariah. It's the narrative of Yeshaya. It's the narrative of course, Chamisha Chumshei Torah. So prophecy allows you to slip a different narrative, not to blind you to the current narrative, because we have to participate in the world of politics, in the world of military, in the world, but it serves as a counterbalance. It can sometimes be depressing, and establishing that balance between employing prophetic narratives to avoid despair or escaping reality by just lollipopping prophetic narratives is a really important balance, and it's not always easy, and I'm sure as I'm saying this, people are thinking about that very delicate tension. But you believe in Am Yisrael. It's basically what's implicit in the Rambam, that you have to believe in something you can't see or predict or doesn't feel likely, and therefore of course we'll leave Gullus, and of course we'll be redeemed, because of course Am Yisrael will perform teshuva. What do you mean? Again, you could shift the weight onto HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't believe in Am Yisrael, but I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he will create an event of such magnitude and such apocalyptic sweep that even the most hardened person, the most secular atheist, will be turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you could, but I don't see it. I don't think HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to. I think in the human heart, in the Jewish heart in particular, there is, and this is Rav Kook, and this is the teshuva that he talks about in Ahavat Yisrael, that's inevitable in part because of Am Yisrael's cosmic role and cosmic place. Now I'm saying this because I've thought a lot about this regarding some of the divisions that we have in our nation, and in particular the very painful and sharp divisions within the Torah world, and in particular painful and sharp divisions that have come to the fore because of conscription. And this is something, I talk about it often, it's because we live with it minute by minute. I mean, they just called up 80,000 reservists yesterday for the 5th round. Behind every reservist is a broken family. Behind every reservist is a broken business. Behind every reservist is pain and suffering, and it goes on. And it's just we're fighting a war with a limited pool of people, and it's leading to real pain and real angst. And again, I've avoided getting on a soapbox because just people want my opinion. They're welcome to ask it. I don't think my voice is going to change anyone's opinion. People have their opinions, their ideologies, and people are committed to their ideologies. But I'm trying to work around it. There's so many issues of what our values are, what our values aren't, depending on which community you're from. Of what I think is avoiding triumphalism. I think a lot of people saying, you see, we're right, and you see our way. It's not the ideological Olympics. No one's trying to be right or wrong. If you feel that this experience heightens the values you believe in and you're committed to, and you want to double down on those values and live them more deeply, and of course create a balanced menu of Avodas Hashem, that's great. That's part of the way we function in life, is we see misapplied values in our opinion, and therefore we become more committed to our values. But that's not a moment of fury and anger. That's a moment of conviction pride, not gloating, not just, okay, this is what I live, this is the value I adopt for myself, and I'm going to try to excel in those values. But it is really hard to feel the same Ahavat Yisrael that we want to feel as Yom Kippur comes. And I keep telling myself two things. I trust Am Yisrael. I trust Am Yisrael. There is a solution here. I don't know the solution. I'm not smart enough. I'm not broad enough to see it. I can think. There are certain hypotheticals I can think of. Maybe they'll come true. But I have to fall back upon, like all faith. All faith is a leap. And you fall back upon something you believe intuitively in and not necessarily corroborated by the events as they unfold in real time. So, can I prove HaKadosh Baruch Hu? No. Can I articulate empirically? No. I just trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu because that's my belief and it was handed to me. So can I prove that under the current situation there's going to be some solution? No. I can use such hypotheticals, but I believe because I believe in Am Yisrael. And I also believe in Torah, and I believe that it's inconceivable that people will be learning Torah without it creating solutions, and that's the solution to, as Parsha Shoftim reminds us, everything we seek in a society. So this isn't a shir where I have this answer, this solution, that solution. It's more taking a step back and saying, I don't think anyone has the answers. And it's really painful. And ignoring the pain and airbrushing the pain is insensitive. And speaking in ways that are hurtful to people that are bearing the brunt, that just wrote about this in my weekly Jerusalem Post article last week, is grisly. To say things that hurt the feelings of, literally an Isra of Onas Devar, Mosonu, Ishis Achiv, Geri Asam Ve'amana. So all that being said, but when you reduce it down to, okay, there are strongly held opinions, and not just about conscription, but everything in our society. Do you believe in Am Yisrael? If you believe in Am Yisrael, this will work. If you don't believe in Am Yisrael, then it's doomsday. And we're spiraling, and we're headed for all the horrible, terrible scenarios, doomsday scenarios. And that, I believe, is latent in the Rambam. It's not explicit. You have to dig these ideas out of Rambam. It's just like the Rambam digs his idea out of the text. In Parshat Nitzavim, in Parshat Kisavo, the sequence, I'm digging this idea from the Rambam's description. Again, the Lashon is, B'sof Yisrael lasos tshuva, B'sof galusin. I forget which parak it's in, maybe parak Zayin, I think. But I haven't opened up the Rambam tshuva in a while. But that's the language. Sof Yisrael lasos tshuva, K'vavtiach Torah, Sof Yisrael lasos tshuva, B'sof galusin. So, we believe in Hashem, we believe in Torah, Emunat Hashem, Emunat B'Torah. Emunat in Am Yisrael is part of Ahavat Yisrael, and that's what I get back before. So you want to start working on Ahavat Yisrael, like any sugya, break it down, deconstruct it. What does it consist of? What does it mean to be a Jew? And can I find Jewish identity, even if someone isn't agreeing with me, or even Orthodox, or even performing Torah mitzvahs, but I love a person because they reflect so much of what I believe in as a Jew. So let's all hope that over the next couple of weeks, we'll work really hard on Ahavat Yisrael, and not just as a platitude.